Good morning. I am Michael Santos, and today is April the 13th. It is 3:45 a.m. in Southern California, and I'm broadcasting live for the first time from Laguna Niguel. And there's a reason I'm doing this. One of the things that I like to do is try to teach and inspire people who are going through difficult or challenging times. It's my hope that people will be able to learn from some of the lessons that empowered me while I was going through 26 years in prison. And one of those lessons was we've got to start our day early with a very clearly defined task of what we're going to accomplish. So today we have been on this lockdown, or what would you call it, social work from home, shelter in place status, and I know that more than 90% of the population is in this same status, and so I thought it would be helpful to record. I don't know how long we're going to be on this status, but I do know that the choices that we make today have a huge influence on how we emerge from this. And the reason I know that is because of personal experiences. I was a person that made a lot of bad decisions as a young man and went to prison in 1987. I was 20 years old when I began trafficking in cocaine. And as a result of those decisions, I was arrested on August the 11th, 1987, and incarcerated until August the 12th of 2013. But during that journey, I had a very productive time, and it was largely because I was influenced by a book. And it's a book of from a philosopher that lived about 2,500 years ago. At the time of my life, I didn't know anything about philosophy, nor did I know how it would apply to how learning how to think differently would change my life. I was facing life without the possibility of parole, but after reading that book, I realized that I had the power within to find strength and an ability to make it through that journey with my dignity intact. And so I served, every day of that journey working to position myself for a better outcome. And that's really the same strategy that has been guiding me since I've come home from prison, which has now been, well, this is going to be my seventh year of being finished. And one of the things that has changed in my life is I've had to, deal with the world outside, which was different from the world inside. And of course, the biggest world is having to learn. The biggest change was having to learn about technology. It was a huge change. When I went to prison, there was no internet, there was no email, there were no cell phones, and no YouTube, no Facebook, none of these tools. But I learned how to use them simply by knowing that this was going to be an important part of my career. And I made a decision to say, okay, the first go through this life outside in the same way that I went through my journey in prison. And that's what I'm doing today. I'm looking at this world where it's kind of like being in prison. I'm in a much more luxurious prison, broadcasting from my home. I've been working from home since I've come home, and I've built a number of businesses just by doing exactly what I'm showing right here. And that's what I did while I was in prison. I would have said, in order to get through this, we've got to follow a pretty simple program. And that program is visualize the best possible outcome. What's the best possible outcome that we can have here? Create a plan that will take us from where we are to where we want to go, and then put priorities in place and then execute those priorities. So it's the same lesson that I try to teach people when I'm bringing creating courses or content that I take into prisons or when I'm working with people out here. One thing I say though is I never ask anybody to do anything that I'm not doing. And you can see by that's one of the reasons that I wanted to start this Facebook Live. I wanted to show people I don't ask people to do anything that I'm not doing. And to become successful outside, we've got to really be doing everything within our power to be strong, everything within our power. And that means that we've got to take advantage of all of the resources in our hands. And the biggest resource that we have is time. I learned that by sacrificing. I won't say I lost, but by surrendering 26 years to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. When you're in prison for 26 years, you really value time. And so, if you really value time, you've got to be thinking in terms of saying, well, what can I do to make the highest and best use of my time? Well, for me, it was to execute on that model. I'm going to visualize the best possible outcome. I'm going to put a plan together. I'm going to put priorities in place, and I'm going to execute on that plan every single day. But if you don't know where you're going, it's impossible to put that plan together. When I was in prison, the plan was to emerge from prison successfully with my dignity intact and opportunities to succeed and to prosper. Plan in place, opportunities to succeed and prosper. That meant I had to visualize the world I was going to emerge into. It may have been 1987. I may have been only 23 years old, but I saw in my head, I'm going to get out of here someday. And when I get out of here, I want to have opportunities to thrive and prosper. And so I had to think not about what I wanted, but rather, what kind of world am I going to face? I knew that I was going to face a world that would be resistant to hiring me. I knew that I would not have any work experience. I will have been in prison my entire life. I knew that I would not have, if I didn't make changes, I wouldn't know anybody except other people that I met in prison. If I didn't make some kind of creative way to build financial resources, I would be returning to society without opportunities to prosper. And effectively, I could be going into just a whole another kind of prison, which is what happens to the vast majority of people who get out of prison. They get out of prison and they may not have any support, they may not have any shelter, they may not have any income streams, and it's only a matter of time for a lot of them before they're trying to blend into society, but they're finding a society that is not welcoming to them. So they revert to the type of behavior that oftentimes brings them back into the crosshairs of the criminal justice system again. And I knew that I didn't want that. I could visualize success for me was to not have the experience that the vast majority of people have when they're in prison, that emerge from prison. Success for me was going to be able to walk into any room, have a suit and tie on, and have nobody know that I served a day in prison unless I told them. But in order to do that, in order to achieve that goal, I had to have a plan. And that plan meant, well, that's what I want to achieve, I've got to be thinking not about what's important to me, but rather what's going to be important to the people I'm going to meet in the future. Who are they? What do they do? What do they expect? What would they want from somebody like me? And it was asking those kinds of questions that really changed my life. That's what made that's what helped me build resilience. It was help me what helped me come up with a plan, restore confidence, and believe I can make it through this journey. And for me, it started with, I told you it was started with philosophy. I don't think I mentioned who the philosopher was, so I will tell you it was Socrates. I read this book by Socrates. It was actually by Plato called The Republic, but it was the story of Socrates. And you may have heard of Socrates. He's a philosopher that lived about 2,500 years ago. And the phrase Socratic questioning comes from Socrates. He was so brilliant that he found answers by asking questions. And the questions that he asked elicited a response that would help shape the way that he thought. And I didn't do that as a young man, obviously. I made bad decisions that really were just about benefiting me. It was the reason that I chose to pursue a path of trafficking in cocaine. But once I read that book, I started to think not about who I am and what I'm doing, but rather I started to think about the people I would meet in the future. What would those people expect me to do if I wanted to have them look at me as something different from the bad decisions I made when I was 20? What would they want? And it was that kind of question that led to this three-part strategy. And that three-part strategy was, for me, and it's not the same for everybody. For me, it was to define success was to come back with my dignity intact, be able to walk into any room, wear a suit and tie, and nobody would know I was in prison for as long as I was going to be in prison unless I told them. And in order for me to achieve that goal, I had to put priorities in place. I had to create a plan. I had to priorities in place. And the plan for me began with this three-pronged compass, a three-pronged compass that would guide me through the entire journey. And I encourage you to do that. If you're living in this type of new world where we're working from home, where we're trying to figure out how do we make sense of this changed world and changed economy that we all may be going into, what can we do to build a successful journey? And that's what I do. But you've got to be authentic. So I'm going to tell you the plan in this first episode of my Facebook Live. And then through this journal, I will be documenting how I do it. So the plan for me was asking Socratic questions of what people would expect of me. And I believed people expected that I would, number one, have to educate myself. Because if I earned an education, people would recognize I don't want to be a criminal anymore. People would recognize I want to bring value to society and to the lives of other people. That's what I saw in Socrates. See, he inspired me. In fact, I'll talk about that tomorrow's episode. But what Socrates inspired me to do was to realize I have to stop living for who I am and try and bring more value to other people. That was like the first thought for me. Okay. Other people are going to expect something from me, and I've got to bring value to them. The second prong in this approach was I've got to find a way to contribute to society in a meaningful, measurable way. And the third prong was I have got to find a way while I'm in prison to build a strong support network. If I could build a strong support network, finding other people to believe in me, people that I don't know and people that don't know me, I needed to find a way to penetrate the penitentiary wall and have people come into my life. And if I could do that, I believed that I would be farther along, or further along, I guess is the appropriate word, further along towards this goal of emerging successfully with my dignity intact and capable of creating my own opportunities in society. So that was the overall plan. And that overall plan, I would define as those are what my values are. My values are going to be to execute on that model. To come out successfully, I need to spend every day focusing on my education, focusing on how I could contribute to society, and focus on building a support network. That was like the foundation. But then I had to set very clear goals of defining what that would mean. And in tomorrow's episode, I'm going to talk about how could I set those very clear goals, because those clear goals would make all the difference as I was going through the journey. I would have to find some kind of way to hit specifics about what I was going to do, because if I didn't, it would just be a long stretch of time because I had a 45-year prison term. Well, now we're on this kind of environment where I have been working from home, staying at home since the era of COVID-19 began, and I've had to kind of implement that same strategy. What's the best possible outcome? Well, I could think what's going to happen if I don't do anything? If I just sit around and not do anything, I'm going to have a real challenge in, hey, look at that, David Lopez. David, I mean, you're such an awesome dude. You follow me, you're always writing. So I'm going to write, hi, David. Thanks for writing. I'm kind of learning how to do this in real time. Thanks for writing. Um, what was I saying? I'm trying to do this in real time just to kind of show people to build a record, because it was one of the tools that I used while I was in prison, to have a record of how I would use every single step, every single day to work toward what I wanted to become. Now, if I wanted to educate myself, I could either talk about it or I could do something about it. If I said I wanted to contribute to society, I could either talk about it or I would do something about it. If I said I wanted to build a support network, I could talk about it or I could say I wanted to do something about it. It's the same thing here, right? We got stuck at home and we had to figure out what can we do. Well, I had to figure out a way. I said, well, I could be here for a month. I could be in this house for 6 months. I could be in this house for 9 months. Am I going to have the tools to succeed? Am I going to have the tools to emerge from this stronger than when it started? Well, I knew I had a lot of confidence because of the experience of being in prison. I had a lot of confidence on what it would take to be resilient, what it would take to create out of nothing. And that's really the foundation of this page. It's called Being Resilient because I know that a lot of people need to be resilient. I started the page with the intentions of growing it, but over time, it wasn't a high level priority tool for me. So that I think you can see that I think I started this page probably in March, maybe early March, maybe late February. Maybe it was even January. And I started it because I was having to rebuild my life after a significant series of a significant business setback that resulted in costing me, millions of dollars that I had worked to earn during my first few years of liberty. And I'm writing about that now, but to walk away from money is it's not that big of a deal, I guess, if you have the confidence that you can restore yourself. And I was strong at that time. I may have lost millions of dollars in a lawsuit, but I knew that I could emerge and I could be strong again just because I'd learned a lot and I'd learned skills. And these are the skills of being resilient. So when I started this concept of being resilient, it was because, okay, it's effectively like I just got out of prison again. In my first 5 years of liberty, I accumulated about $5 million worth of real estate assets and business assets. And all of that was stripped away from a bad business decision that I made, and I had to live with it. I can't cry with it. I had to effectively say, okay, I'm going to rebuild. I'm going to rebuild with my dignity intact. And the way I'm going to do it is in a very transparent way because I can say for certainty that when I was during this first 7 years or so of my liberty, I've been out here in society and I've seen a lot of people that live in a prison that to some extent is bigger than the prison that held me. And it's a prison of mindset. We've got to be able to, if to the extent that we can develop our mind and think about what we want to accomplish and what best possible outcomes are, we can put a plan in place, we can put priorities down, and we can execute that plan every day. And that's what I'm doing. So it's not an anomaly for me to start my morning, before 4 in the morning. It's something that I really transitioned, that I started while I was in prison, and it's been with me ever since. Where I try to document what I'm doing, I try to define what I am going to accomplish, and then I execute on that. Now I'm going to use this live journal tool to try and show other people that I'm not somebody who's giving you theory. This is real world practical experience that empowered me through 26 years in prison, and it is what allows me to build businesses with nothing more than my mindset, even while living in prison, even while living in this pandemic. So every day, I visualize what it is that I want to do. And I can tell you that as soon as I end this broadcast in a couple of minutes, I'm going to go back to my home office, which is upstairs, and begin writing because part of the way that I earn a living is by ghostwriting books for other people, and I'm in the midst of writing a book right now. It's just work. It's work that I trained myself to do during a difficult time when I was going through 26 years in prison. So I'm going to go up, write chapter 2 of that book. I expect to write about 2,500 words before 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock this morning. So in the first 5, 6 hours, I'm going to knock 2,500 words out. Then I likely will come right back down here, go to my treadmill, exercise, run, and following that, I will start creating additional content for our YouTube channel at Prison Professors, for a podcast called Prison Professors, and I will be recording an audiobook for a friend of mine or who is has led an amazing life, and we worked together, collaborated together to write his book. But I have to record the audiobook, so I've recorded 3 chapters so far. I'm going to record the fourth chapter, and after I record the fourth chapter, I'll set it up on YouTube. Then I will turn my attention back to this pandemic because there are hundreds of thousands of people in prison that their family members should be learning what they can do to get them out. and the Attorney General has spoken about it. So I've been creating a lot of content for that. It's on my Prison Professor's website, or Resilient Courses website under COVID-19. If somebody clicks the tab, I'm preparing these videos so that family members will know steps that they can take to help their loved ones come home from prison. So I'm still very passionate about prison reform and about helping people in prison understand what they can do to use their time to prepare for success. Now, unfortunately, you know, tens of millions of people are without work, and many of them, hundreds of millions of people, I guess, are working from home. And so I think it's important for people to see that even in a time of challenge or struggle or difficulty, if we use these principles of defining success, of figuring out a plan, if we know what success is, figuring out a plan, and then putting priorities in place and executing that plan, we can restore confidence, we can be resilient, and we can get through this. And so I'm going to bring this episode to a close. This is the first one. We've been together for about 20 minutes on Monday, April the 13th, and I'm going to get back to my work right now, and that's what I encourage you to do. It's 4:05 a.m. in the beautiful city of Laguna Niguel, California, and signing off until I think I'm going to try to do a recap as well before I go to bed to talk about, well, how did I work, how did I do on executing on this model? And I would encourage you to join me if you choose by leaving your comments and subscribing to our new channel at Being Resilient, and more importantly, sharing strategies that you're using to be resilient. I'm Michael Santos, and I want to thank you for being a part of this program.